Right, let's fire up the Quattro.
That catchphrase can only mean one thing. We're on to looking for the Quattro from Ashes to Ashes. Now this was the follow-up series to Life on Mars, and we've already done our work tracking down the Cortina in a previous video. But Ashes to Ashes was first aired between 2008 and 2010 over 3 series. It still featured Philip Glenister as the lead character Gene Hunt, but now starring alongside him was Keeley Hawes. And the location for this had moved. Life on Mars was in Manchester and Ashes to Ashes was located in London, but a few years later in 1981. Before we get too far into this Quattro, I want to do some housekeeping. Firstly, JLY 751V was not the original number plate. That was originally given to a Nissan Sunny in beige of all things. Let's be honest, the thought of Gene Hunt screaming "fire up the Nissan Sunny" doesn't have quite the same ring to it. So that was a fake plate that they used on the car for the filming. And the other thing I want to clarify, before the Audi Quattro nerds all leap in, this program was based in 1981, but they'll all tell you that this car was actually a later car from 1983. And the reason we know that is the first Quattros into the UK would have had recessed headlamps like this. They would have been left-hand drive because the initial batch of cars was only in left-hand drive, and these cars are all right-hand drive. And the final thing is it's actually got a sunroof fitted, which the first cars wouldn't have had the option of. So we know there's a little bit of TV entrepreneurialism. Is that a word? Yeah, near enough. So let's get that out of the way. Let's track down the cars. It doesn't take an awful lot of internet digging to discover the real registrations of the Ashes to Ashes Quattro. There was APH 55Y and HWX 930Y. So first off, we'll do APH 55Y. Now this car featured in all 3 series. In the first series it was for internal and external shots, and in the later 2 series it was mainly external shots, but I'll fill in the detail on that in a minute. Now once filming had finished with this car, sort of probably early 2010, it was actually put on display outside the BBC Television Centre in London. And we've actually got some interesting pictures here on Flickr by Ben Sutherland, showing it was just parked outside, and apparently it was there just to give people queuing to become audiences for TV programmes something to look at while they were, joining the queue. Now, what subsequently happened was in 2014 it reappeared up for sale on an eBay auction for BBC Children in Need. And according to the description, the car had actually been refurbished and renovated, I think the word was they used, by Audi themselves, and was being put up for sale to raise money for the annual Children in Need appeal. It came with a fresh MOT and had been signed under the bonnet by Gene Hunt, aka Philip Glenister himself, and the auction ended at £38,598, which I know doesn't sound a lot for a Quattro in today's money, but back in November 2014 a top dollar restored Quattro was about £15,000, so there's a definite sort of Gene Hunt premium on that one. The interesting thing that happened thereafter was it had a change of ownership. If we look at my car check in December 14, which ties in with the sale in November, but then it had another sale, or another change of keeper I should say, in the January, and it hasn't had a change of keeper since then, so we can only assume it's in the same hands. But the MOT history actually gives us a little bit of an interesting story. It has the MOT in October 2014, just before the sale, as you would expect, and the mileage was 163,057. Okay, not unexpected for a car of that age. It has another MOT in 2015. It's only done 60 miles since the previous one. Doesn't have an MOT in 2016. Now you need to remember that for something later. And then it had an MOT in 2017, 2018, 2019, and in the 2019 one it's only done 126 miles since the MOT before it was sold for Children in Need, which I find quite incredible. So this car really isn't getting used very much at all. And as it stands at the moment, according to DVLA, It's on Sawn, so it's registered as off the road. And you know, the last MOT was that one that expired in 2020. So, as ever, if you know where it is, please give us a shout. So on to the second car, HWX 930Y. And this was used in the majority for internal shots in Series 2 and 3, but also some external shots, and I'll come to that in a minute. This again was a 1983 car, and for Series 2, Action Cars, a company had taken over for the sourcing and maintenance of the cars for the series. And they were asked to source a second Quattro. The reason for that is, apparently in the first series, they were spending so much time rigging up the car with all its sort of equipment for cameras to do internal shots while they were driving along and so on, that it was costing them too much time. So they wanted two identical cars, one they could have rigged up primarily for doing internal shots and one for actual external sort of driving around shots. So they sourced this car in Kent, and it was very similar to the APH car, but apparently it was a slightly different red. The original APH car had actually been sprayed in the BMW colour, so they had to repaint that to match. They then noticed that the second car had a sunroof, which has actually been requested because they want to be able to let more light into the passenger compartment to make filming easier. We've had that before with the professionals cars, but APH didn't have one. So how they got around it was actually glued a sunroof rubber onto the roof of APH to make it look like it had a sunroof for the later series. And the other thing is, this new car had a slightly different style exhaust, so they had to mock up to make the two cars look identical. Despite being primarily a car for internal shots, come the third series, HWX took part in a couple of quite important external shots. The first was in the first episode of Series 3 when there was a car chase, and part of it was filmed around Battersea Power Station, and the car had to do a jump just for a bit of special effects, and apparently the jump was all set up, ready to go at the right height. I think it was about 18 inches high, where the director of the programme decided that it wasn't high enough, so they raised it, I think, to something like about 40 inches. And the reason HWX was being used, because of the two cars, this was considered the more sound, i.e. probably at that point less rusty. And despite that, it didn't apparently fare very well on the land from this jump, because it was a lot higher than what was intended. And then, of course, the big finale for this one was the end of the series when the Quattro gets sort of shot up, and I think Gene Hunt used words along the lines of "they killed me Quattro," and apparently this was always designed as a big finale for the car, and they used HWX, and apparently what they did was create a lot of holes in the bodywork already, and then fill them, paint over them, but these holes had a small explosive device to make it look like it was being hit by bullets. And there were 46 of those placed all over the car. So, big finale, set them all off, blew holes in the car, and, that was supposedly the end of the Quattro. Around 8 months after filming and finished, so I'm guessing this was probably about the middle of 2010, Action Cars were told they could dispose of HWX. Obviously it was in a slightly shot up state, and apparently the writers of Ashes to Ashes, there were two of them, and they requested a door each as a memento of the series. So we've now got a Audi Quattro, lots of bullet holes and missing doors, and a few broken windows. Now the easy thing obviously at that point, because the cars weren't worth that much, was probably could have scrapped it. However, the person at Action Cars decided, having spent so much time on the car over the previous few years, he would actually restore it. So purchased a couple of replacement doors, replaced the glass, but interestingly, where the bullet holes were, instead of repairing them, it just lacquered where the bare metal was to leave the holes where they were, and actually on the doors put vinyl stickers which represented the bullet holes that had been there for the TV programme. And apparently they took it around a couple of local shows, and obviously people recognised it from the TV programme. Now this car appeared on eBay for auction in February 2014. And I'll be honest, I don't usually get so much information on a car drop in my lap, but on this occasion it has. And this is why I can talk, I think, with such authority on this particular car, is because all the information was listed on eBay associated with this description. And what I'll do is I'll put some screenshots of that right at the end of the video so you can have a read through it yourself, because there's so much. But you know, I've really just touched on the highlights for you there. They said, you know, in 2014 this car last had an MOT back in 2009, which sort of ties in with all the other dates we're aware of. So it had been off the road for a while. Apparently it was a runner, but did need some work. Some of the interior was missing and so on. Bits that had been done for filming, modifications, and that was still with the car. But this car sells for £15,100 February 2014, and really impressively on the 22nd of the 5th of March, really not that far away, it had an MOT pass, so it was back on the road pretty quickly. But the thing I love about this MOT pass is one of the notes, it says near side has puncture marks, i.e. the bullet holes, which I don't suppose you get that on many MOT passes. Now interestingly, this car didn't go in for an MOT again until December 16, which it passed, but it had only done 18 miles since the previous one, so it's really done a small amount of mileage. Now the interesting thing I've noticed with these sales is that the HWX sale was in February 2014, and this did actually attract quite a lot of media attention. And then the APH sale came along in the November of that year, and I did wonder if the Children in Need people spotted the reaction to the sale of HWX and thought, oh, it's a great idea, we've got the original car parked outside, we'll get Audi to give it a refurb, and then we'll put it out to auction to raise money for Children in Need. Don't know, it's one theory though, isn't it? So if we go over to our partner My Car Check, we can see there's been no change of ownership since that 2014 auction. So we can only assume that that car is still in the hands of the person that purchased it at that time. And that sort of brings me on to what I think's happened with these cars. Is I've got a suspicion they're owned by the same person. Let me explain. APH didn't have an MOT in 2016, but HWX did. So it could have been the case, well, I've got both cars, I only need to put one through MOT, maybe. The other thing is they've both done exceptionally low mileage since that purchase. And it's quite unusual for two cars to have exactly the same sort of usage. Might just be coincidental, I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. But I just think it's odd that they've both gone off the radar, they both had extremely low uses, and they've not changed hands. So that's my theory. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's been one of the easier ones in some ways because all that information I had on the second car. But as ever, we'll keep looking for these TV cars and bringing the stories to you when we find some interesting ones. In the meantime, take a look at this video because we think you're going to enjoy it.